Singularity starts with a flash-forward opening. We'll get into that later on. The Enterprise is flying towards a black hole with 2 stars pouring material into it. While on board, everyone is passed out. Everyone but T'Pol.
Even if Enterprise makes it past the black hole without being destroyed, it seems likely the crew won't survive.
That's nothing new for me. I usually think that when I watch them in action. Singularity was the first solitary work for the show by Chris Black, who would the following season do the episode Doctor's Orders, which likewise will involve one person needing to keep things going. Chris Black went on to do other things, obviously, but to me the most notable would be his involvement with Apple's show Severance, including writing episode 8 personally. We resume after the titles and learn this all started 2 days ago when they found a trinary star system, one of which was a black hole. Archer agrees they should go check it out, but before Tucker leaves, Archer asks if he could take a look at the captain's chair. Just doesn't feel right. Also, Archer learns that Chef is feeling ill. Hoshi's volunteered to take over, though. And as for Archer himself, he's found out there's a book being written about his father, and he's been asked to write the preface. But he can't get down to just 1 page to say.
How am I supposed to sum up my father's life in a page?
Perhaps by focusing on one incident, a single event that exemplifies your relationship with your father. You'll be able to condense your thoughts.
Perhaps that story about the gazelle, sir. Hoshi gets to work making one of her grandmother's recipes for dinner, and not with protein resequencers either. Remember when food was made of food? Pepperidge Farm remembers. Well, Mayweather...
Ensign, is there something I can do for you?
Did you two have a fight? Did Mayweather forget to leave the toilet seat down for Phlox or something? Anyway, Mayweather is here because he has a headache, and Phlox won't hand out aspirin without examining him first. To be fair, if Chef is out sick, checking to see whether Mayweather has the same virus would be prudent.
Think it could have something to do with that?
Oh, I never rule out anything.
Except helping people who are going extinct, of course. He starts looking Mayweather over while Tucker works on the chair, to T'Pol's annoyance. She's trying to work on these sensor readings.
We also have sensitive hearing.
Of all the ways to say screw you, doing it while literally screwing something is very appropriate. As for Reed, he wanted to see Archer to discuss his concerns about the responses to threats. Reed's, of course, not Archer's. Archer's far too obsessed with the book. Reed says the crew is fine, but they could be doing better. These are usually life-or-death situations, after all, and be good to be punctual. Reed has a list of times when having a better response, a ship-wide preparation for battle stations, bringing the weapons and hull polarization online, would have definitely made a difference. Archer says to ask the other senior officers for input on it. Oh, and to ditch the name battle stations. It's not going to play very well in the focus groups. Reed takes a deep dive into this, just like Tucker is with upgrading the chair, putting in all bells and whistles short of actual bells and whistles. Hoshi comes by to fish for compliments, which might be a pun. I don't know if that dish contains fish or not. But she's horrified that, when pressed, Reed found the dish to be a bit salty. Well, now she's looking a bit salty. Also getting worked up right now is Phlox, who is convinced something is wrong with Mayweather. Except nothing is showing up. Ergo, there must be something very, very well hidden, and he needs to keep digging until he finds it, no matter how many holes he has to drill into his brain. As for Archer, his preface is coming along.
Scientists with names like Tasaki and Cochrane. At the time, I didn't realize the significance of those names.
Give me your honest feedback, Porthos. I can take it. Tucker gets called to T'Pol's quarters where she's working on the sensor readings. Seems she's noticed some odd radiation from the trinary star system and needs to install a special doohickey in order to look more closely. I hate being too technical, but there it is. Tucker's unhappy, though, that she's interrupted the work to come down here, all in the name of exploration, when he could be doing the extremely important job of working on a chair. As for Mayweather, he's been up all night being examined and poked and prodded, and I really think that pap smear was totally unnecessary. Well, it suddenly seems to sink into him that he didn't get those upgrades done, and he's convinced if he doesn't finish the job quickly, he's going to wind up with his career destroyed and being court-martialed over it. So he doesn't give a damn about any more tests. He's getting the hell out of here to get back to work. Well, seeing as how he hasn't figured a damn thing out here, Phlox does the sensible thing and, of course, sedates Mayweather against his will and straps him down so he can do the very scientific job of poking his brain with sharp objects. Yep, strap him down good. I have it on good authority that on Voyager, Janeway does this to disobedient crew right before Chakotay comes in to tell a legend of his people. Speaking of unwilling audiences... And there's the bell announcing the halfway point. As you can tell, the title Singularity is not just a reference to the black hole, it's a reference to each character's singular obsession, to the exclusion of all else, devoid of any sense of proportion and zero patience for the slightest obstacle. Reed, when T'Pol shows up, adds a not-so-healthy helping of paranoia to that. What is very appropriate is that having worked on this, I've actually developed a couple of obsessions of my own. One because this episode is about black holes, and the other because this episode employs a storytelling technique that I feel is worthy of some serious examination. As a result of which, I realized if I put all of my thoughts into this one video, I would spend most of the time talking about things besides the actual episode. So here's what I have done. I've taken all my thoughts on the black hole and the radiation and such, which has to do with the plot, and tacked it on to the very end, after I finish discussing the final score and all that. If you want to hang out, you can listen to me talk about black holes and radiation. The other is a discussion of the storytelling technique used here, an examination of what it goes into all of that and how I feel it is being misapplied in this particular case. It's more a video overall on discussing about how story construction should be, but it also does have to do with this. I decided to spit that one off because it made a little more sense to give it its own video than the one about black holes. Anyway, why don't we catch up with Archer and see what he thinks about all this discussion of techniques.
You obviously don't know anything about writing.
Well, let's not go overboard, though. What the story has going for it is that these people aren't out of character. They're operating the same, just with their dials fiddled with. I mean, you are still you when you're drunk, just possibly a you that you're not very proud of, and who thinks that you're good at karaoke. I would do anything for love, but I won't do that. Things continue unfolding along these lines until the read alert goes off, only it's just a drill to demonstrate the poor readiness for emergencies around here. Tempers really start flaring, and T'Pol finally goes to see Archer in private to say, look, this is an emergency. Everyone is obsessed with trivial bullshit. What do they think they are, fans? Archer is too far gone, but going to see Phlox reveals he's about to cut out part of Mayweather's brain just to look at it. She has to finally nerve pinch him when he threatens her with a scalpel. And he's not the only one passed out. Everybody is now. Everyone but T'Pol. Right where we started. So yeah, 10 minutes from the end, we catch up with the flash forward, and Phlox's obsessive study of Mayweather's brain has revealed the radiation from the trinary star system is causing the problem. And as sometimes happens, turning around is slower than just hitting the gas and plowing ahead. But she's going to need help to do that. So she tosses Archer in the shower and sprays him like he's 3 sheets to the wind, until he's lucid enough to grasp how screwed they are. She explains that she's got to determine the course corrections to navigate the path through this mess, so she needs him to actually pilot the ship. Boy, I sure do hope a cop doesn't pull them over. So they follow this path that T'Pol is marking out, except there's an asteroid ahead, splitting apart and pelting them with debris. It's only the read alert automatically coming online in response to that gives them phase cannons in time to use them. Now, the most dangerous part of continuously shooting asteroid pieces to make them smaller and smaller is that the flying saucer will show up and shoot you. Well, anyway, they make it through. Everyone starts coming around and acts a whole lot nicer in the coda. The end. Post-episode follow-up. Annoying character is hard when everyone is an asshole by design. But still, I'm going to give it to Reed for going over and above this week. All scores are relative to their series. Final score for Singularity is a tough one, but I'm going to go with 7 out of 10. I stand by my criticism of the narrative structure, but the episode is nevertheless a stronger one for this season, because it leans heavily on character. They might not be their normal selves, sure, but their abnormal selves are revealing as well. So now I've talked about the episode, I'm going to go to that thing I mentioned earlier about my little obsession lately with black holes. See, there was a paper that came out not long before this review was originally done. I say that because if I don't, then irony will make me have to redo it at some point. The paper's about how an advanced alien intelligence could make a black hole to serve as a planet's moon, which would actually, due to Hawking radiation, give off enough energy to serve as its own personal sun. Now, before I go on, I know that knowledge about black holes isn't necessarily universal, especially if you look at some science fiction, there's a lot of misconceptions, so I apologize if I sound like I'm talking down to you in any of this. I just thought I'd cover all of the stuff before we get into what the meat of this is. So just bear with me. Oh, and also, you're going to hear a bunch of terms that you normally hear sci-fi writers using to hand-wave stuff away. I'm trying to actually use them correctly here. At the same time, though, I'm not a professor at Cornell, so I'm doing my best to try to balance accuracy with accessibility and the fact I may be talking entirely out of my ass. Okay, let's start with quantum fluctuations. I told you it was going to sound like made-up sci-fi bullshit. Okay, quantum fluctuations is because of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. You can't simultaneously know with precision the energy of a system and how long it exists. Consequently, so-called virtual particles could just pop into existence, appearing in opposites, particle and antiparticle, and then annihilate each other. Imagine a seemingly still pond, but once you really zoom in to look at the surface, little ripples appear and disappear super fast. That's quantum fluctuations. This represents the fuzziness of space when we're at the tiniest of scales, a consequence of the fact that quantum mechanics is inherently probabilistic in nature. So this happens all over the place, all the time. But under certain circumstances, these virtual particles can actually become quote-unquote real if they are separated from each other. Now in 2011, it was shown that the dynamico-Casimir effect can indeed do so. We're not talking about a concept that is only theoretical or mathematical. It was experimentally verified that virtual particles can become real, or at the very least, that the results are indistinguishable from actual particles being involved. Now, Stephen Hawking theorized that if a quantum fluctuation happens near a black hole, it could also happen. Two virtual particles becoming real, where one would, to put it simply, fall in, and the other would escape. For conservation of energy, the one falling in would have negative energy, and the one escaping positive energy. Absorbing this negative energy particle thus slightly reduces a black hole's mass. Because of the whole E = mc squared thing, negative energy leads to loss of mass because of a loss of energy. The escaping positive energy particle is then perceived as radiation. So from an outside perspective, the appearance would be equivalent to the black hole slowly turning its mass into energy until finally it just evaporates. Hence why this is called Hawking radiation. What's interesting is that the smaller a black hole is, the more Hawking radiation it gives off. To clarify, when I say smaller, I mean a smaller event horizon, as all black holes are, as the title implies, a singularity. So when I refer to the size of a black hole, I'm just using shorthand for the size of its event horizon. So the reason that these smaller black holes give off more Hawking radiation is because the smaller the event horizon, i.e. the closer to the singularity, the stronger the surface gravity is. Think, for example, of the thickness of a small bit of rubber, as you were to then stretch it around a tennis ball versus stretching that same amount around a beach ball. It's just an analogy, but the idea is less surface area, more concentrated. This means then that more of the interactions between the black hole and the virtual particles will lead to more particle pair separations. i.e., Hawking radiation. Imagine the two black holes are trying to capture these virtual particles, but one's using a butterfly net and the other's using a fishing net. The stronger surface gravity of the smaller one is just more effective. So these smaller black holes are losing more mass because of Hawking radiation, plus they have less mass to begin with. Consequently, they evaporate much faster. For the purposes of this episode, this radiation that the black hole is giving off happens to be causing the plot of the week to take place, possibly because the stars are having some kind of effect. Now's when we're fudging because it's fiction, and I, again, credit them for not operating on the everything just gets sucked in approach of black holes. Oh yeah, to what has me obsessed with the black hole moon thing. The idea is fascinating, but I keep running into a mental glitch. Probably because I'm missing something, because, as established, I'm a guy who says magnetic balls for a living. I'll just put this out there anyway, though. This paper posited that the black hole would weigh 100 million kilograms, or roughly the weight of the USS Gerald R. Ford when it's fully loaded, which is pretty light for a stellar object. But with a high power output in Hawking radiation, as established, because it's small. The paper says to offset the loss of mass, so that the black hole doesn't evaporate within a year and a half, the aliens would then need to inject around 2 kilograms of matter every second into the black hole. That's the part I've been stumbling with. And it's probably because I'm not versed or I'm missing something obvious, so I'll just put it out there. According to my math, we're talking a black hole with an event horizon that's measured in zeptometers. That's something so small, I don't even know if I pronounced that correctly. For scale, if an electron were the size of a planet, this black hole moon we're talking about would be the size of an atom. Again, I'm comparing an electron to this black hole. That's what I'm stumbling with. It's easy to say that you could just add matter to it, but the question is, how? You can't just lob an old boot at it and expect it to get sucked apart and slurped up like your mind might think with black hole. A black hole that microscopic couldn't absorb the matter of a neutron star at this rate, even if the matter could somehow be unaffected by being removed from the neutron star in the first place. That's the densest theoretical material that exists, with one obvious exception. Which means then that the only way that any aliens could feed this black hole would be with another tinier black hole. Now I should note that I've actually been thinking about this problem independent of this paper for some time, because I've been thinking about the Romulan engines that run on artificial black holes and how they might work, and whether or not they might be absorbing Hawking radiation like this. Essentially a black hole reactor. Except when I looked into it, the power output just isn't really worth the bother. I mean, paradoxically, it seems that being able to stream matter into a black hole in order to keep it from evaporating requires the black hole to be of such a size that the Hawking radiation is not worth the effort, compared to other ways that you could generate power. Essentially, the only beings who could do it wouldn't need to. Now, let me be very clear. I'm not a graduate from the Dunning-Kruger School of Astronomy. I know I don't know anything. That's kind of what's bothering me here, is I'm trying to figure this out, and I can't seem to. I'm not saying this guy who published it is wrong. He's an astrophysicist, and again, magnetic balls guy. So I just am wondering what I'm missing here. It bugs me to no end, and when that kind of thing happens, I try to turn my frustration into your entertainment. Again, I'm just a dude who putters with black holes in his spare time, and so my thought was, if the intention is to try to detect activity of an alien intelligence when it relates to black holes, that it might be more likely that an alien intelligence might use a black hole, whether natural or artificial, for computational purposes. That's one of the ideas, taking advantage of its unique nature. And that might be something that an organized intelligence would do. The intentional injection of particles into a black hole would probably be something distinctive that you can look for, certainly compared to matter falling into a black hole by happenstance. This could be strong evidence for alien intelligence is if you see some kind of sign of that, compared to black holes being used as an artificial power source. But again, I don't claim to know anything about anything. I'm a weekend warrior who finds this fascinating, and I'm not claiming any expertise. I just think it's something fun to think about. Thought I'd share it with you.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!
I know you don't think this chair is important, but you're wrong.